Welcome to Iron Sights. This podcast candidly seeks to create opportunities and deliver impact by sharing the experiences and wisdom of successful entrepreneurs and thought leaders who unapologetically aim to win in health, fitness, business, and life. I'm your host, Scott Howell. Welcome to Old School Meets New School. Tradition meets innovation, and imperfection meets excellence. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Welcome back to Iron Sights Podcast. We are here with a very good friend of mine. We go way back. His name's Donnie Oliver. Donnie, welcome to the show, man.
Welcome back to Southern California.
It feels really good to be here, actually. We're here for those people that are watching this thing. We're actually off location. We're out of the studio in San Jose, and we're down in Huntington Beach, which is near basically the old stomping grounds that you and I used to tear up for several years. I mean, there's a lot of stories, but just a block or so from the beach, albeit it's a little overcast out there. It's not what I had hoped it would be, but it's nice to have you here. And man, if this is what I got to do to get in touch with you or get in front of you, I mean, like, this is what I'll do.
This is what will end up happening in like 2 weeks. I'll be up in San Jose now.
Yeah. I've only been trying to get you up there for a year now.
Yeah.
Things have been a little weird. Obviously from a travel perspective, but from a work perspective. And I think anybody that's been in the fitness industry this last year there's been so many adaptations and challenges that we've had. Everybody's just running and gunning and being resilient. And in that amount of time, since the last time I saw you, which was a couple of years ago, you went from being the VP of fitness for UFC GYMS to being the VP of global franchise operations. We've talked a little bit, but I don't know how you're doing all that. I mean, it seems kind of crazy at the moment. I want to dig down into that. But first, I just wanted to kind of go back and review a couple things. So when I first met you, you were a coach. Yeah. You were a coach in, was it Pacific Coast?
I think I was still West LA.
Maybe, yeah. We're going back several years. We're going back more than 10 years now.
15.
Yeah, 15-ish, yeah.
18.
Oh, stop. Stop. We don't need to go back any further than that. And this is what I remember about you, man. Like, hair on fire, right? And this is the dude we have to pull the reins back on a little bit, but he is killing it down there. And by the way, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. If you call the club, the dude's going to be there, and he's going to be hammering away. And that went from being a coach to immediately like this dude needs to be running a club and then some clubs. And this is at a time when the company was going through some transition, I think, and the whole region was going through some transition, and we were really looking for key players to step up and take leadership roles. And leadership started with, kind of a first in, last out kind of attitude, and understanding how to be resilient and navigate through change. So, if I haven't done it already, it's probably time. And I think we've had a lot of conversations. We've had a lot of beers together and whatnot over the years too. But dude, I cannot thank you enough for the amount of effort that you put in during that time, because it inspired me during those. I mean, let's be honest, there were some rough, dark times there. But then there was, on the backside of that, there were so many good times.
So much fun.
Yeah. So maybe talk to me a little bit about, because I don't know a whole lot about this. Like, how did you get into the fitness business?
So really quick, like when you frame it that way, right? You, like something you said there, the first in, last out mentality. And again, that's how I saw a lot of other people get ahead, and I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do, right? Like, that's how you get ahead. And we'll talk about this, I'm sure. It's having that expectation nowadays.
Oh, dude.
Well, and again, in navigating weird times that are going to require resiliency with a lot of unprecedented change going on, not within a company, but obviously companies are having to deal with it. But like that, I think that was like the foundation that I was expecting to see from people. Like, hey guys, things are going to get weird. We're not going to know what's coming next. The one thing you control is your effort. Let's go. And that's not what a lot of people signed up for, I think.
Oh, I don't think anybody, the way it was described to me, I was just having a really great conversation with a guy by the name of Adam Salcedo, and what he is he's a professional mindset coach, and he works with basically high achievers or high performers, and in a way where it's, let's figure out what it is that you need to do in order to get through this problem, in order to perform better. What are the routines that you need to establish? How do you block out the noise? How do you stay focused? And kind of one of the things he described to me is, people are, for the first time in their lives, what he's recognizing are they're in a position where they have to make decisions. Mm-hmm. He didn't say this, I'm saying this. I think what we're looking at right now is and kind of how people are handling the challenges or the problems that they're faced with, whether that be it in their company, in their work, in home, in their family, situation, life, politics, relationships, all those kind of things. I think what we're suffering from as a whole, as a society, is the helicopter parent, the result of the helicopter parent parenting or syndrome that's kind of happened. And whether that's, what's happened in the last 20 years or 30 years, I don't really know. I don't know, but what I see is people freezing in their tracks and not being sure what to do. And that work ethic is not something that was ever instilled, and now it's being introduced to them for the first time under all this stress.
Yeah.
And you're right, they're not responding very well.
Yeah. It's out of the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to expect there. I think for me, it frustrated me. It still frustrates me.
I'm always caught, anytime a conversation goes this route, right, about this young generation, I always caution myself, I don't want to be old man, get off my lawn. I don't want to be.
I'm that guy.
These kids.
I'm that guy.
Because I don't I want to say it's not generational, because there's young people that I work with that they are that. Mm. So, then I go well, maybe it's not generational, then it's just, but when you zoom out, there's a smaller percentage of people that are wired that way, and it's probably just because their parents were wired that way. And so
yeah, it's just I need to take control, and I don't know how to take control. I have a decision to make, and I don't know which one.
I've never been in a position where I needed to do that.
Somebody suggested this to me. Actually, it was our good buddy Stonehouse had suggested to me that he heard somebody use the phrase decision fatigue. People are fatigued from having to make decisions. And I just sat there and I just...
You mean what am I going to post on TikTok?
Yeah, this was my point.
It's not a decision.
That's what life is, man. We make decisions and we move on, and they're not always going to be right decisions, but you got to make a decision, you got to move forward. And so going back to, where you started and how you started, the impact that you made on me was rooted in a very strong work ethic, also rooted in a desire to perform and to be number one, right? I want to be the best. I want to be the guy. I want to be the phone call. I don't want there to be a hesitation. If I sit down for an interview, I want to be buttoned up and basically be in a position to, when the cliched question came across the board, so tell us why you think you're fit for this job and why we should hire you or why we should promote you to this position. I always wanted to be in a position to stare back and go, why don't you tell me why I shouldn't? Look at that resume, record. Look at that track record, look at that performance, and why don't you convince me on why I shouldn't have this job? Again, in my head,
yeah,
right? But that's how I saw you perform, and again, that wanting to be number one and that driving through, and falling down, having to pick yourself up, but also supporting the people around you, and I just wonder where that came from, because you were new in the business at that point. I had a few more years under my belt, but it was something that stood out to me immediately. And I knew about you before I even got to Southern California, because again, in performance, I'm measuring, who's doing what, and certainly moving into a new market. Who are my performers in this market, or who are the guys that, whether I'm competing against them or I need to support or whatever else, who are the people, and your name's popping up on the list. So I got to know these guys. I'm just curious where that came from.
Yeah. So, going back, right. How did I get into it? Stumbled in, right? Graduated Penn State, broadcast journalism. Got a job with ABC, Channel 9, K-Gun, Tucson, Arizona, doing reporting, doing camera work. And, I wanted to be a ESPN Sports Center anchor. So
you got the headset on?
Yeah, that's why I went to school for that. I wanted to be an ESPN Sports Center anchor.
You've arrived. We're not broadcasting sports, but you're wearing the outfit.
Here we are. Now I got the headset. did that for a couple of months, and I was just like, this is not what I want to do.
So what was it? You're disillusioned about what the job is, or?
Now at the time, like there was some stuff that really resonated with me at the time when I was leaving. I knew, I don't want to say that I thought I knew why I was leaving. Like I knew why I was leaving. But now with perspective, there's certainly in some of the positions that I've held, I have an appreciation for some more reasons why I left. So like one of the things was it's local news and there's some ambulance chasing. Mm-hmm. So, hey, a motorcycle crashed into the side of Mount Lemon and they've had to shut down the road. Can you go up and get some footage? Like, right? Then I had a story that I had to cover where, this girl was coming home from like a church function. She's like probably like 16 or 17, coming home from a church function. Bad timing. She gets to her house like right as a B&E is happening. Like so things go wrong. She gets shot. She's killed. Oh, I'm interviewing the neighbors. I'm interviewing her friends from high school. And that's just terrible. And then the last story that I was responsible for, there was a carjacking. Basically, the kids carjacked the car for a set of rims, like at an intersection, pull the mom out of the car, jump in the car, start driving off, realize there's 2 kids in the backseat. They kill the 2 kids. Like,
this is all bad news.
Yeah, and I'm just like, and this is just weighing on me. And then, so right after we did that one, and it turned out like one of the kids who stole the rims, like his mom turned him in. She saw the rims in the garage, and it's like you're interviewing all these people. And Tucson's not a big town. Like you're interviewing all these people, and it just sucked. So like right on the heels of that, one of my friends from college, and I've only been, I'm out of school less than a year. One of my friends who's in her senior year at Penn State dies in a car accident. I go back for the funeral, and I just made this decision. Like I don't want to do this anymore. Like this is not what I want to do. So I quit. And I remember calling my parents to be like, hey, I'm quitting my job at ABC.
Right.
And I credit to my parents. They're like, yeah, you're miserable. Like, what are you going to do? And at the time I was in that job does not pay well. Right. This is 2000.
You're cutting your teeth.
Yeah. I'm probably, I don't even know what I want to say it was 15 an hour, but that was probably a lot back then. So probably not even that. Mm-hmm. But so on the side, I was bartending 2 days a week on the side.
So many trainers started in the bar or did the double.
So hustle. While I was doing that, like I was just like, I called up the bar manager and I was like, hey, I quit my other job. Like I'm going to start working full time. And they were like, dude, yeah. So then I was the bar manager, like really quickly. Did that for a while, moved out to California, was bartending, Chili's, BJ's Brewery. A girl that I was dating, her mom was part owner at a pension administration company. And so I started doing that. I started doing some pension administration stuff. She got me a job there. Good money, boring. Like just, it's terribly boring. That got me into doing some stocks and mutual fund stuff with Citi, so I was living in Brentwood, commuting to Burbank. Hated it. So again, no plan. I quit. And I'm going to the Valley in West LA when I was living in Brentwood. And there was so when I was living in Woodland Hills, I was going to the Valley in Encino. Then I moved to Brentwood, started going to the Valley in West LA. The girl at the front desk, I walk into West LA one time, and I recognized the girl at the front desk from Encino. I hadn't seen her in a while. I'm like, Ani, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And she's like, oh, I got promoted. I was the assistant operations manager. I got promoted to ops manager. And I was like, I'd never thought of a gym as a business before. It's like you go in, you wreck shop, and you leave.
Right. I think that still exists.
Yeah. Like, oh, wait, tell me more.
So what's your real job?
So she tells she's the ops manager, and we get to talking, and I remember like just kind of mentioning like, yeah, I'm looking for something to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. She introduced me to Reggie Welch, who was the fitness director at West LA at the time.
Right.
And I said in my interview, I'm looking for something to do while I figure out what I want to do, which kids don't say that in an interview. But he hired me anyway. And Yeah. And so then I started training there, and I was lucky. That gym, I mean, I think back about the coaches that were at that gym, and that gym was stacked. Mm-hmm. And weirdly, I mean, just that area, like with trainers from all different parts, like Philippe Tomaszewski, Loritz Austinson, like all these guys from France, from Switzerland, Basic Alvardashvili from Georgia, Russia. Like we had guys from everywhere.
And the neighborhood was much different then too. It was very diverse, but it was also very affluent.
Yeah.
Right. So you had some talent with some real characters.
Yes.
Right. So it was like there's a lot of persons. It'd been kind of equivalent to maybe being in, in New York City, in one of the neighborhoods.
It was lightning in a bottle for sure. Yeah. And I was like, and I didn't know, I minored in kinesiology. So I was working on getting my NASM at the time, but I knew enough to just sit back and take notes. And so I'm watching these guys that are great trainers. I'm watching them work with but my business starts picking up faster than theirs. That's just gift of gab. I'm not a good trainer yet. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, how are you getting so busy? And I'm like, you teach me how to train, I'll teach you how to get clients. Yeah, and so it just became like, that was the I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Reggie ends up going to, I think we were grand opening Inglewood. Reggie went to Inglewood. Juan Hernandez came over. So Juan's my FD. And then it was like, hey, we're going to put you in charge of the weekends. You're the AFD. And then I remember getting a call from Armin, and Armin's like, the way that we used to do things in the industry, no heads up.
Yep.
Right. Cause you don't want to tell somebody they're getting promoted, because then they'll stop selling. I get the phone call, like, 9:30 at night on closeout. You report to Redondo Beach tomorrow.
Right.
You're the fitness director at Redondo. Yeah.
Yeah. And you take that job because
you don't say no. Like you, okay.
Well, you also know what the trajectory of that is. Like back then it's like, look, I know this is what I got to do. And by the way, the condition of the club at that time, you're not being promoted into that club because that club's doing well.
Yeah.
You're going to that club.
It's at the bottom.
Because it's at the bottom of the pile, and you're the best candidate based on your track record at this point, at least to their knowledge, to go
sight unseen.
And turn
I've never seen it, other than, to your point, like you had mentioned before, like looking at the DPR, right? Like that club, I think the month before their goal was probably $30,000 a month, right. And they had written like $7,000 the month before,
right?
But that was less than my personal,
right?
Like I was like, yeah, I can go hit that.
But
goal.
It's not like you're taking clients from West LA to Redondo Beach. No. That's not happening. So you literally have to start from the bottom and work your way up. But you also get a clean slate.
Yeah,
right. But you take that job.
Well, no, and literally, I remember getting there, and so I go to that gym, and I'm looking for, okay, where's the first workout pop-up box? Where's the new member list? Where are the session logs? Like, I can't find anything. Like, no wonder you guys aren't writing any revenue. And I remember calling Armin, like being like, because obviously, yeah, I'm calling Armin because I think at that point
he's the area director.
Yeah, we had done the one person overseeing, which that never works. And I remember calling Juan and Lauren, and their thing. Look, Armin said, clear out any of the desks, just throw everything out. Drive back over to West LA.
Get what you need.
Photocopy everything you need. Replicate every binder that you need, and then go back over and just start from scratch. And
you're given the autonomy to do that.
Yeah. And
it's essentially the rest is history there, because you weren't there very long before you got promoted.
No, there was Huntington Beach, right. And there was Long Beach.
You just could kind of go through the ranks. Pop. That's how a lot of businesses work. Like, you get on the ground floor, you do the work, you prove yourself, right? You build some relationships, you have some consistency, and when the opportunity comes, you don't balk at it, you take it. I don't care if it's going to take me an hour to commute to this particular place. Like, I take this job. So flashing forward, your VP of fitness for UFC, that wasn't too long. It was just whatever in the last year before the things changed for you. But how is it different now than it was then in terms of attitude about promotion, or I guess from how do you come in on the ground? What's the attitude about coming in on the ground floor and having to do the work to get paid?
So when you've got a smaller ecosystem, you can control it, right? So like if I took like that Torrance UFC gym, when I was interviewing people to come on board, I was able to attract people that had skill sets and talent. Take a guy like Jason Pease, who I remember when he was in college at Long Beach as a trainer at the Long Beach gym, and then he went to Equinox as a manager and became a studio owner. When I was interviewing him, like I was telling him, like, you're not coming in as a manager. You're not coming in as an assistant manager. Like, you're going to come in here as a coach, and you know what to do, and it'll become evident to everybody very quickly. And I'd rather, when we give you a formal title, that the response is duh, about time.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Not who's this new guy that's coming in with a title, right? And so you get some people that get that. Other people want the title they want the reward before the work. And so my thing has always been come in, do the work. Like there's some things where you want to say like, hey, just because I did it this way doesn't mean it's the right way. But with stuff like that, like I stand by it. Mm-hmm. Like this is what I did. It works. It didn't just work for me. It works for other people. So this is how I want to run it.
Makes
Come
sense.
in, put your head down, and I think you create a right culture that way. And then, kind of like you were talking about, like with that experience with West LA and Redondo, the other thing that I like is when you have a program, an environment, a culture that is working the way that you want it. Like you can objectively from above detached look at it and go, this is what it's supposed to be like. Well, then when you've got other cultures that aren't going that way, extract DNA out of that one and go plug it in somewhere else. And that's how you'll spread the good stuff and fix it. I don't like, and there's exceptions to this, I don't like internally promoting from a place where the culture is, but like
it's broken.
If we're all sitting around like, oh man, that location, like they're always doing their own thing. It's always a pain. Nobody wants to go there because it's just a headache, but we've got bigger fish to fry. And then like the GM or the FD or somebody leaves and quits. Well, take that as an opportunity to select somebody from somewhere else and put them over there, not promote from within, because what you're doing is you're
perpetuating the problem.
You're unintentionally saying, hey, what was happening in this place is okay. And now you've emboldened it. Now the challenge, and again, I don't want to be old man, get off my lawn. Getting people to just pick up and go somewhere else. Like, hey, there's an opportunity to be promoted, but you're either going to have to commute or you're going to have to break your lease and you're going to want to move closer. Like you said, like when it was...
Or it's more hours, there's less time at home.
Driving from Brentwood to Huntington Beach, it's not that far, but that's a haul.
It's a long way, man.
Right? And so, but there wasn't a question. Nobody called me and said like, hey, would you be interested in taking the Redondo location? It was tomorrow you report to.
Yeah, but there's also this, you want that job, right? Because you recognize that
was a step.
It's a step up, and it gets you closer to the next step and the next step. A bigger problem arises when people don't want the job.
And that's I'm trying to understand
which happens when you promote maybe from within and go, why do I want to be that guy? I mean, that's the fastest way to get out of this company is to take the promotion into this particular position. In this case, it's a fitness director job, but I don't want that because all those guys they've seen it modeled. That's where you go to die. It's like being the first round draft pick as a quarterback coming out of college. And knowing that the Cleveland Browns are going to have the first pick every year. I mean, that's where you go to die as a first-round draft pick as a quarterback in the NFL.
His career hasn't worked out the way that I hoped it would. But I remember, I think it was Teddy Bridgewater, that I think it wasn't Lamar Jackson. Was Teddy Bridgewater at Louisville before Lamar Jackson?
Man, you're the sports journalist.
I think it was Teddy Bridgewater, where I remember joking with people, like his combine and pro days went so piss poorly that I don't care to this day what anybody says. He tanked.
He threw it.
Intentionally.
Yeah, he threw it.
So that he wouldn't get drafted by the shitty team at the beginning.
Right. I think the bigger thing is
sidebar.
That's a problem, right? Like, because now... if you're the Browns, we're going to get the best guy in the league, but our team sucks, right? Like our best potential option, which by the way, it takes 3 years for a quarterback to kind of cut his teeth, and that's kind of the average, and maybe that's changed. I don't know. The game has changed so much. The NFL's changed so much more. My point is you're not just going to show up and change the world. But at the same time, the culture within the team is how many Super Bowls have the Cleveland Browns ever won? 0.
Well, it's like you
said, they're never going to be champions, and that's in their lineage now. We're just not champions.
You've got to be. Well, I guess it comes down to this, right? Is the person wired? There's some audacity here, and there's certainly ego, and ego is not a bad thing. There's ego, but it's the size of the ego. I think of somebody like Joe Burrow. Yeah, I'm going to go into this team that's never won anything. They've been losers. for decades. I'm going to go in and change it.
Okay. Yep.
Right. And do you have the belief in yourself that your ability is good enough and big enough to change the course?
Where is that? So the question I would ask is, where is that belief coming from? Is that because you really did those things? Did you really perform? Were you really held accountable to the things that it takes to be a champion? Yeah. And I think when you start to look at that and look at the ones that were true champions, they all have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. Mm-hmm. They all did. They were all probably had their people were snubbing their noses at them. Mm-hmm. They probably slept on a few couches, right? They had to grind to kind of get there, versus the one that's been coddled and told they're the best, whether, have gotten themselves out of situations that they should have been held accountable to, and the culture that creates, or the mindset that creates. Sorry, about being
no accountability.
Yeah, about being like, I can go in there, I can do this. This is no problem. This is what I was born to do, right?
And then the rubber meets the road.
But then they're faced with the reality of, oh shit, I'm not equipped for this.
Nobody's doing what I told them to do.
Right? Like, wait, if I jump up and down and scream and stomp my feet, I don't get what I need, or what I think I need, or what I want, and it's not working that way. And I just, again, going sort of back to organizations and kind of how you came up, there was no stomping your feet. There was just grinding. And for a lot of the folks that we've worked with, or I've seen that have been successful, and I think you look at the most successful people out there, they've had to do this, right? As leaders, maybe CEOs, but there's this underbelly of the working culture, right? And the organization of, where did those people come from, and what are they doing to drive the culture forward with regard to this work ethic and taking the next step forward. Like, what am I, first in, am I first out, or am I showing up for my interview going, well, I have my papers, I have my degree, I have my 2 years experience, and I should get this now.
And that's and again, it goes back to this, again, self-awareness, right? And you don't want this to come off as false humility. Like, when I'm talking to people, like, as you move up, more and more people ask you, like, oh, what did you do? How did you get there? Right. Look, I tell people, and again, I don't want this to come off false humility. The thing that I realized is, I came into this industry, I had no special skill set that was going to separate me. I'm not 6'3", chiseled Adonis. Like, I didn't play in the NFL. People are going to sign up with me. I wasn't a former UFC fighter. So people are like, I didn't have anything that was going to make me stand out other than resiliency. I will outwork you. That's going to be my ace. When I need to pull a card, I will show up before you. I will be here when you leave, and I will expect the same. And I think that's what's interestingly enough, that's probably one of the things that has put me in some binds through my career, is expecting that of other people.
And it's an unrealistic expectation.
It is
for everybody.
But I just feel like it's something that I refuse to move off of. Like, as much as it's gotten me into trouble, and I've been told, like, you can't expect that from everybody else. And I'm like, no, I know that I can't, but I'm going to anyway.
It's not wrong. It's just an unrealistic expectation. Yeah. People aren't going to care as much as you do. And you have to learn how to deal with that, right, as a leader, and then have to navigate through
every once in a while, though, that people pop, like, in the reverse, slip through the cracks, and they do care as much, and they see how you work, and then they model it, and then those are the people that you promote.
And those are the ones that end up being successful at whatever they do, whatever career path they end up taking in life, whether they stay in our case, the fitness industry, they move on to something else. They're killing it wherever they're at.
Well, we saw that when Bally fell apart.
Yeah,
everybody who left Bally, like, that was anybody, and went to go do whatever, in the industry or out of the industry,
they're thriving.
They killed it.
Yeah, they're thriving.
Because they just learned how to grind and make chicken soup out of chicken shit.
Right. Literally. Yeah, and be okay with that. Yeah, actually see it as a challenge and get up every day with a smile on their face going, I have the opportunity to be challenged today. And so I think just kind of coming back to where you are now, there are a lot of challenges, man. I mean, you work for a couple different companies, right, in a couple different positions. A
couple of bankruptcies.
Right, a couple of bankruptcies. I mean, there were some weird times there, but again, to the resiliency, concept, all of those things, when you come out the other side, you're stronger and you're equipped and prepared for the next thing. And you talked about kind of stepping back and looking at it from the 30,000 foot view. Now it puts you in a position to go, look, I've seen this, I've seen where this goes. I can kind of anticipate a few things. But one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to focus on the things that are outside of my control, right? And so here's the things that I can control. I can still, be first in, last out, and make that productive, and still, and maybe be better at balancing life, and work and all those things. But also understanding that sometimes things get out of whack, and that's just how it's going to be. Mm-hmm. So things got a little out of whack there. I mean, you take over this VP role of fitness for one of the world's largest fitness companies. We'll talk about how large that thing really is. I mean, from a brand perspective. Well, we'll come back to that. So you take this role as the VP of fitness, and then immediately get punched in the side of the head with shutdowns and COVID shutdowns. Yeah. And now you've got all the staff underneath you, right? Who you've earned your way there, right? And you've done it because of all the things that you've said. Hey, we've got all the staff, got this entire company that we've got to deal with, and you're kind of the guy, right? Mm-hmm. Walking into a really a very difficult situation as a leader. There's some tough conversations that need to be had. Mm-hmm. What was the toughest part about that for you? Knowing that what was imminent, and that was, we're going to have to shut clubs down. These employees do not have jobs anymore, effectively right now. Mm-hmm. What was the toughest part about all that?
So it's interesting because the timeline of where things were moving, I took the global position February of 2020. Mm-hmm. So right before this is going down. So at that point, it was weird because then my relationship with the people is going to change, right? I've just recently stepped out of their org chart, but then a lot of people are calling you, right? So then it's this added layer of complexity where I'm having to answer questions, and I'm not your direct report. So I'm going to give perspective, but I can't speak, for someone else. But again, I think, here was a benefit because of my style and who I've always been, which is going to be, I'm going to shoot you straight. There's not going to be a whole lot of fluff here. It's going to be, it is what it is. Take it or leave it.
That has it's a double-edged
sword. Yeah, it certainly, and a lot of times it's going to have blowback. But like in this case, the people that were reaching out to me going, hey, what's happening? What's going on? I'm like, I'm going to tell you exactly what's going on. And there's not going to be sugarcoating. Right. Like I could try to make nice out of this, but like, we're going to close the gyms. We're still going to have to pay rent. We've got loans that are out there that we've got to pay. And it's either and again, no, people couldn't see this,
right?
But it was like, hey, chances are if we don't do what we're about to do, furlough, stuff like that, we won't make it out the other side of this. Like 24 closed in their bankruptcy, closed over 120 gyms. Mm-hmm. Gold's in their bankruptcy closed. There was so many companies that had to file bankruptcy where we were as a company with, again, like you said, like the logo kind of shines. And at the time provided the perception of a much bigger footprint than we really had at that point. And we had 14 gyms. That we owned and operated. We've got the international franchise was starting, but there wasn't a lot of gyms. Domestic franchise is a mixed bag, obviously. Mm-hmm. A lot of our franchisees didn't make it through COVID. But had we not done that, well, then it's either, hey guys, either we furlough people and it's going to not taste good and it's going to be messy, but we'll survive and there'll be a business on the other end of this, or we don't furlough anybody and we stick our head in the sand and then we'll just cease to exist in a year.
Right. It's self-preservation mode. I mean, that's what everybody had to go into. And maybe some people are still feeling like they're in that, to some extent. But of course, employees are calling like, what's going to happen with my paycheck? Because they have loans. Yeah. They have they have mortgages. They have car payments they got to make. It
literally just went to, okay, here's how you file this. And again, that's where like our HR team did a really good job. It was constantly peppering people with like, here's where you can get aid. Here's where you can get more money. Here's where you can get benefits.
Right.
And constantly just giving people that. And then, this doesn't work for like the membership sales guys and stuff like that. But for the trainers, it was like, look, hit up your clients.
Figure out a way. Yeah.
Go train them in the park until the gym opens.
Right.
We're going to, I'm not going to tell you, you can't train your clients at the park when the gym is closed. Like, go train your clients at the park.
Yeah, that's the whole look. We have to figure out a way through this, and it is a little bit of self-preservation mode. Now, be smart about this, and get out there and do the right thing. Take care of your clients and get paid that way, the best way you can. We'll find a way out the other end because there were no solutions right at that point.
And us understanding now, you're not going to get some of those people back.
Correct.
Like, because some of those guys are going to figure out, like, oh well, like
you mean the coaches?
Some of the coaches, you're not going to get them back. Yeah. They're like, hey, I'm going to stay private, and the gym's opened up, and the flip side was, okay, you're not going to get some of your best people back because there's a lifespan in being a coach, and some people stay in a big box forever, but some of them, they graduate. You've accelerated their graduation.
Sure.
But you also got an opportunity where, hey, if you had some knuckleheads that you are going to have to navigate the world of human resources and document, now you don't have to. Don't bring them back.
Right.
So you're going to lose some of these people, but you also get to kind of wipe the slate clean. We told people when we were reopening, bring back the people you want to start with. Mm-hmm. This is your opportunity.
Start with a clean slate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can look at it that way as an opportunity with a clean slate, or you could look at it as
oh, this sucks.
Yeah, and it did. Let's be honest. Like you're starting over.
You're right. Like both things can be true at the same time. Yeah. Yes, this sucks. And it's an opportunity to start.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know that. I mean, I think looking at the bigger picture and all the different types of businesses out there, in California particularly, obviously the gyms were hit very, very hard. Globally, gyms were hit very hard, but with this, and for good reason, I think we needed to make some decisions collectively to try and figure things out, and where it went from there is another conversation. Altogether, I think it's still. Rooted in a lot of ignorance and I think the fire's being fueled by alternate agendas when what we should be worried about is our collective health. And again, a conversation for a different time, but just coming back to the people and bringing your coaches and your people back in. I think other companies didn't suffer that way. What they had to figure out was other businesses had to figure out how are they going to operate from home, particularly in the Silicon Valley. I've said this before and I'll continue to say it. At worst, some of these companies were mildly inconvenienced and so were their employees.
Yeah.
Mildly inconvenienced. And certainly while we're dealing with the depths of what a virus and a pandemic can bring to the table, from a business perspective, you're dealing with logistics right now. That's the worst thing you're dealing with, and
our supply chains are messed up.
Yeah, and okay, well, we'll work that out, and they have been worked out. Well, currently things are a little bit different in the last 6 or 8 months. They've certainly changed a little bit, but the point of that is you've got other businesses out there, and there were some particular ones, and obviously the gyms, both big and small, were being impacted by this, and so you had an opportunity to kind of recalibrate. And still moving in the same direction, but in a different kind of way with a different staff. But it's definitely been a slowdown where it took before 3 to 6 months for a new trainer to kind of build, or a new coach, or even some practitioner within the club to build their business. Now it's taking longer as people are a little bit more hesitant to come back. Obviously, the volume of people didn't come back the way we'd hoped it had come. I mean, clubs are writing record numbers in terms of membership sales, during the summer this year, but we're just recapturing kind of what we had.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's you had some huge months, but those were just members that are finally like, okay, I'm coming back.
But you're still behind revenue from previous years and so forth. On the whole,
the membership bases are, I would say, we're still down about. We're probably down a full 30%. We've upticked a little bit, but you're still down 20-25% of your member bases, and traffic. Check-ins are probably still 70% of what they were. So revenue is going to be lower.
So you're getting these calls, and people are having to navigate, and obviously you're meeting with the collective team, the executive team, just going, hey, here's what we're dealing with. How can I be of assistance? And everybody's taking on a larger role, whether you're the CEO.
Now you're skeleton crew.
Yeah, you are having a lot of conversations you wouldn't typically be having in a very different way, and trying to figure out how to get to the other side, as you said, and still have a business and make it worthwhile. But now you're in this all of a sudden in this global VP of
talk about a crash course,
right?
In I'm trying to
So now you're getting calls from Dubai and Taiwan and wherever as well.
As I'm so assisting with some of the domestic franchise stuff, right? And okay, where can you get small business loans and stuff like that? And then I'm trying to find out, okay, in other countries so that I can assist those franchisees. Okay, in Russia, like, you know, what kind of assistance is there, right? In Mexico,
there's no handbook for this.
Yeah, there's not, like, I'm just going into rabbit holes in Google trying to figure out, like, hey, like, have you guys looked into like this, you know,
program or whatever?
And then you've got other countries where, you know, everything was just on lockdown and it's like, okay, there's no mortgage, there's no rent, and everybody just stay at home. Okay, well, you guys don't need to do anything.
So to give some context of just how big this is. Yeah. So there's been a lot of UFC, one of the biggest brands in the world. I mean, I would argue, and there's a few of these brands, but I would argue that you could go to any corner of planet Earth and you could wear or have on a UFC hat or UFC shirt or whatever, and people would recognize that brand.
Yep.
Period. And amazing story about how UFC almost went away and then made a massive comeback to where it is now. But to give some context, to the UFC brand, there's been a ton of growth planning that's happened in this last couple of years. And interestingly, be interested to hear your opinion on whether or not you think COVID actually may have helped this a little bit in terms of establishing, maybe slowing things down a little bit so you can maybe get your arms more around it, because this is a massive machine. Mm-hmm. So how many clubs are we talking about that are currently in the United States, currently global, and what is planned over the next, say, 2 to 5 years?
So in the U.S., we've got just over 30 that we own or operate. And then we've got, if you add in just domestic franchises, you're at about 100 gyms in the U.S., which that's not small. That's big right there. And then internationally, we're really close to 50 that are open currently internationally. So all in, we're sitting about 150 gyms right now. And in the countries that we're open in, probably 20 countries that we're open in. Development deals that are signed, right? Which now it starts to, we've currently got development deals signed in 39 different countries. And we're on the verge of having those 10-year development deals, with extensions and options for another 10 years on top of that. But all of their development schedules are for their full maturity to be reached inside of 10 years of their deal being signed. We're right on the verge of 1,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you just went from 150 to 1,000
inside of the next thing. So 2022 is going to be weird because we thought we'd be done with this, and apparently we're not.
There's a lot of variance out there, man.
There's variance. So we'll see what happens in 2022. But conservatively, I'd say 25, 30 gyms will open in 2022. So we'll be approaching, 175, 180. After that, you're probably looking at domestically, I would think that we'll open 15 to 20 a year in the U.S., 2023, 24, 25.
That's combined franchise and corporate owned?
Yeah. And then internationally, 75 a year for the next, and that's going to be 75 a year for 3, 4, 5, 6 years in a row.
Wow.
So, at that point, you're talking about opening up 2 gyms a week for 4 or 5 straight years.
This is like the Starbucks story. Like when I think there was a time when they were opening a new Starbucks like every 2 minutes or something like that in the country or globally.
Yeah.
It was insanity. It might have been even down to seconds. Like within a minute, there was another Starbucks opening. I mean, that's what it calculated out to.
Yeah.
I think what's crazy to me, there's a lot of craziness about what you just said. The growth strategy. I mean, that is massive growth in a short amount of time. It speaks to the brand and the confidence that, investors have in the brand and what it's capable of doing. But it's also kind of a comeback story for the industry, in that, big box gyms were kind of going away there. They were suffering because of the studio fitness business, and they were suffering because of kind of the stigma that came along with being associated with a big box.
Big box.
And now you've got a gym that offers some unique, offerings as compared to everybody else. And the other part is that the bridging of the, I'll just give you an example. Like my mother, so my mom's up in San Jose. My mom and dad are up in San Jose, and they're opening. There's what was due to be open or
Oak
whatever.
Ridge Mall.
The Oak Ridge Mall location, which is due to be
February.
Yeah, and they're getting bombarded with mailers and print ads and things like that.
Good, it's working.
Yeah, it's working. As I said, it's working. My dad's always, I got another ad from him today, and whatever. The point of that is like she's at her age, she's like, I can't see myself working at a UFC, and I go, well, why not? She goes, well, it's just but they're in there fighting and doing everything else. I'm like, that is not what's going on at a UFC. That you might see some of that happening in a room somewhere, on a mat somewhere in a jiu-jitsu space, or in where there are a bunch of bags hanging and they're going through like a bags class or something like that. But the majority of the gym is your general fitness equipment. It would be like walking into anything else. Definitely a different vibe, right? Mm-hmm. It definitely feels maybe a little bit edgier, but you're going to see all walks of life. And the fact that UFC is crossed over that way is nothing short of fascinating to me.
Disney owns ESPN.
Right.
ESPN has the rights to the UFC fights.
Yeah, exactly.
So like Disney is showing the UFC fights. Like that's where we've gotten to. Right. From pay-per-views where they had to find a state that hadn't deregulated them, right? Yeah. From hosting fights in a state where there was no regulation stopping them.
Right.
And being on pay-per-views only, VHS tapes was how nobody watched UFC live.
Right.
Like it was your buddy had a VHS tape that had fights on it. To being on Spike. Mm-hmm. I remember it was a massive deal
to be
the first time they were on Fox. I remember Cub Swanson was telling us a story, the first fights that they had on Fox, and the Fox executives were losing their minds because it was just there was an exceptionally bloody fight, like eyebrow busted, nose busted, like there's just blood. And he told us that in between rounds when they were cutting the commercials, like in the NBA when the guys run out with the mops to mop up the sweat, they had guys in the octagon wiping blood off of the octagon before they came back from commercial break.
Yep.
And now the Disney parent company is airing UFC. So now it's this mainstream thing, right? So last night I was taking a boxing conditioning class up in Torrance with the coach that was teaching the class, Chris Ortiz, just had his 6th pro fight this past weekend, won his 6th fight. That's the guy coaching the class, right? So it's not, I won't say names of brands, but like it's not a gym where, you've got, soccer mom teaching the boxing class.
Right.
I've got a pro fighter who just won a fight 3 days ago teaching class. And next to me on the bags, I've got these 2 members that they've been members of the gym for years. They're regulars. But they're these, 2 women that are, taking class, and they're in TRX class and they're in the group fitness room and they're taking the boxing class. I've got a person on the bag right next to me that's well overweight, pushing themselves, and it's a new member. I've never seen them before, but they're loving the class. And one of the other people in class is one of our other coaches who's a pro MMA fighter that
getting some conditioning in.
He's getting some conditioning in. And it's like, that's who's in class.
It's insane. So coming back to the comeback, so like the big gym, and it's not going to be all of them, but it's going to be gyms like UFC that are able to do this, that come back, and you just mentioned, like, it's not a soccer mom. I think this is interesting. It's not a soccer mom that's coaching the boxing class. This is a pro-level fighter. Now, when I think back 15 years ago, when we were, kind of running wild here in Southern California, when you walked into our gyms and we had these types of classes there, mm-hmm. And the boxing thing was always a thing. I mean, we could tell stories about us trying to recruit these guys in and how difficult it was to work with these guys. But the bottom line is those are the guys you wanted in your classes because that's who the soccer mom wanted to train with.
Yes.
I want to train with the pro boxer. And I know I'm never going to be a pro boxer, but I want to be that person that trains in that class with that person. And then it got then boxing classes turned into, and then there was Taibo because people had seen that
proliferation.
But they recognized like that wasn't really boxing. It's aerobics. It's an aerobic activity, and there's nothing wrong with Taibo. Billy Blanks did a fantastic job.
Do it.
Love that guy. Built an entire franchise, on his brand and what he did. But the point of that is that got old for people real quick. They wanted to hit shit, and they wanted to do it for real. Yeah. They didn't want to pretend. And, if that wasn't for you, that was fine, but people would line up. That's how Crunch got started, right? There were lines down the street to get in and do these boxing classes, like it Gorilla, and then Gorilla, pulled up on that, like, and so they started all these studios. And so what ended up happening over time is those coaches that were making good money maybe doing it, and they were able to provide that service, and gyms or their employer took care of them in whatever way, or whether they were independent contractors or whatever. It lasted long enough until people started recognizing, well, I can pull out of this and I can build these little studios, right? And I can just offer this particular service on a much smaller footprint, much less overhead, make a lot of money doing it, and I have my little cult following here, and this works for a while until it doesn't. Because then you've scaled to a point where you can't handle anymore. You've worn yourself out. You've run a poor business. All of those things. And it's interesting that what we're seeing is it kind of trying to cycle back, right, to where the bigger boxes are now trying to kind of put the studio back into the bigger box. So it's like a studio inside.
Like you and I remember one time it was funny because we probably had about a 2-hour call, and I think back to this now how funny it is. We had like a 2-hour call, you and I, where we were talking about private training, group classes, just the complexity
of what
we're doing, right? This is probably 4 years ago. I was in the group fitness room at Sunnyvale. Like, I don't know why we were having a 2-hour call when I was in Sunnyvale.
You were just
like, I could have just drove over to the gym. But that conversation sticks out to me because for the first time, like, I feel like I wasn't trying to explain our business to somebody outside of the industry, and it was complicated. I was explaining our business to somebody who knows the industry very well, and it was complicated.
Right.
Like, because to your point, like what we've done is said, there's going to be this exodus, this emigration from big boxes. And now, okay, how do we pull that tide back? And when I look at our brand, I go, there's boutiques within a box. I think about a mall. A mall is this massive building that has a bunch of different stuff going on in it. And none of those things are necessarily related to each other, right? There's a food court and there's a Victoria's Secret, like 10 seconds from each other.
Yep.
And so when you walk into one of our massive 50,000 square foot boxes, you've got this, and there's got to be a better way to describe it than functional training because that's just been abused and bastardized. But like you've got our daily ultimate training, right? Which I also don't like labeling like high intensity interval training because that's not necessarily what the class is either. It's not CrossFit without barbells. It's not, but there's that going on, right? There's tires and there's med balls and there's kettlebells and there's, sprints and there's that community going on that loves doing that. And 20 feet away, there's a spin class going on or there's a Zumba class going on. And literally 4 feet away from that, there's a boxing class going, and the community that's in that boxing class. And a few feet away from that is all the meatheads in the free weight area, pumping iron. And next to that, there's this, it's new to most people. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but it's this new emergence for most people. There's these 6 platforms, and there's people camped out doing Olympic lifts and all of that. And then next to that, there's this jiu-jitsu space going on. All of that is happening. Oh, and there's this youth gym over here where there's kids taking Muay Thai or jiu-jitsu.
Operation.
There's 7, 8 things going on all at once, all sort of surrounding your traditional cardio. There's all your treadmills and so you've got all these people that, to your point, like, okay, here's your people that might have been at this brand just because they show up to do cardio. And there's a jiu-jitsu community, and there's a Muay Thai community, and there's your group fitness. There's 8, 9 different ecosystems all interacting. That is complex.
Yeah. So how do you take that? So going back to the whole global franchise operations, it's a massive operation, man. So you've got all this growth that you got to put into place. I mean, does this work everywhere? And I guess kind of where I'm going with this too, is the massive amount of opportunity that's out there right now for coaches, but for the customer, for the consumer, right? To get their ass off the fucking couch and get into a gym and do something, because gyms like this they have something for everybody. Like you can walk in there and you can literally do all of these things. And again, if that's not your game and you want to do the one thing, I just want to do cycling, well then go at least do that. Those places are they're going to continue to exist. But again, there's so much opportunity. Like, I think you just said we're going to be opening 75 clubs a year globally. That's a lot of space for people that aren't currently doing anything, either from a career path perspective, or from a
definitely some job creation,
and a health and wellness perspective that the fitness industry is creating for you to go and take control over and advantage of. Take control over your health and potentially your finance, right? But also, just your future.
I see a lot of similarities with what's happened the last 2 years for our industry to 2008.
I was just going to say the exact same thing.
It
peeled back.
It gets bloated, and you've got people who are in it for the wrong reasons, right? Whether that was membership sales, whether that was personal training. Like 2007, working at a gym was printing money. You didn't even have to have a skill set. I mean, we used to talk refi and buy.
It was good.
Hey, you're out of sessions. You need to buy another 50 sessions.
So on a credit card.
Oh, yeah. Or just refi my house. 0 points. I'll just refi my house, take out some cash, and buy more training. Like it was that easy. So you didn't have to be good. There was a lot of shitty trainers.
Shitty gyms.
Shitty trainers, shitty operators. Right. There was just you didn't have to be good. You didn't have to care. It was, I like working out. I'll do this. Okay. Everything collapses, right? We're not riding donkeys with pots and pans clanking, but like shit was bad.
It was bad.
And okay, so everybody who wasn't in it for the right reasons got out. Good. It's a cleanse. It was a purge. Like, good. And what I tell people all the time, like when I'm doing the coach certifications, I explain to people, like, it's a recession resilient industry. When the economy's booming, we're opening up more gyms, we're setting sales records, we're setting membership records, we're setting personal training records. And a funny thing happened when the economy was crashing. We were opening up gyms. There were coaches, now again, minority, not majority, but there were coaches that were making more money than they had ever made in a down economy. Okay, well, similarly, I see that. Like, look, some of the companies that had to file bankruptcy and had to close lots of gyms, that wasn't because of COVID. That was the smokescreen. That was their cover story. They were going to close anyway.
Good timing.
Yeah, and they got to take advantage of some PPP loans, and they got to clean up a little bit of shop and then close, and they don't have to own it. They don't have to go, my gym closed because I was a shitty operator.
That's a really good point.
I closed because of COVID. No, you didn't. You were going to close anyway. COVID is cleansing the system, getting some bad operators out. And if you love what you're doing and you're in this industry and you're a good operator, you're going to benefit from that. There's the silver lining. And as I don't know how many letters are left in the Greek alphabet, but once we get through all the variants, the people that are left are going to benefit because I think, this is just personally, I remember one of the assistant fitness directors that I had at Culver City, Marissa. She had her degree like in theater arts major, from Baylor. Baylor, yeah. The guy that she was dating when they moved out to California, who she ended up not staying with, was questioning her about like why she was working at a gym, and it didn't. And it's funny, like this was probably 12 years ago, but it didn't pop up in my brain until COVID happened. And I was trying to explain to somebody how a lot of the population looks at gyms. And this is evident in how governments were bucketing us with restaurants and bars. Mm-hmm. Gyms and restaurants and bars, as if those are the same three fucking things. Right. Her boyfriend at one point, who was giving her shit about like, why are you working in the gym? Like, who goes to the gym to work out? It's like, he saw it as purely masturbatory, was his phrasing of it. Like,
interesting.
I feel like a lot of the population thinks that way about fitness.
It's at least 80%, as we know from statistics.
Yeah, we've got 18 to 20% of people have gym memberships, and the rest think this is you guys are all weird. Now, what with the data-driven, obvious impact to people who were not in healthy, good shape, there is a disproportionate extra effect to being not taking care of yourself. So my hope is that as we navigate through COVID, that we stop, as an industry, what we've done for so many years is just fought over the same 20%. And we've never really gone like, okay, how do we stop fighting over the same 20%? And how do we get 25%? How do we get 30% of the population? We haven't been able to figure it out, but I think we've been gifted it. I think that this is going to drive, maybe marginally, maybe bigger, this is going to drive a larger percentage of the population, US and globally, to open their eyes and go, oh, there is value in taking care of myself that isn't going to be taken care of with whatever, pill or cream I'm supposed to take, right? Like, you have heartburn, you have high blood pressure, you have all this. Okay, here's all these pills that can do all that, but like that didn't protect your ass against this virus.
Right. So there's a couple things here. First off, this goes back to the opportunity piece. Yeah, I started Red Dot effectively in 2009. Like, people are looking at me like, you're fucking crazy, man. What are you doing? You're starting a business at this crazy economy,
We're
right?
Going into a depression.
Right. We're going into a depression. This is nuts. And what I realized was that we needed to make some adjustments. It wasn't people didn't have money. They were just being smart about their spending the money instead of refinancing their house to get personal training sessions or whatever in that example, which, by the way, people were literally doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't just to do personal training, but it was to do a lot of things that didn't make a lot of fucking sense, right? Regardless of whether it benefited, the company that I was working for or not. But I again, my point is, I started that, and people had money to spend, and they have money. They have money to spend now, particularly those that already had a lot of assets going into this thing. Their asset values are higher than they've ever been, right? And again, going back to like our local population, those people that were mildly inconvenienced, they spent less money than they were spending, because they weren't taking. They're not all of them are homeowners, right? So they're not all dumping their money back into their homes with new windows and pools and things like that. They have the money spent. You needed to talk to them differently. You needed to have a different conversation with them about it, because things were so volatile and it was so sketchy, so to speak. You had to talk to them in periods of 1 to 3 months, not a year at a time. So what are we doing now? And not locking them into longer term contracts, or let's just even say thought processes or programs to take things to, too far down the line, because I don't know what the shit's going to look like. And it's a lot like it is now, going back to COVID, right? Like, I don't know what this thing's going to look like in a month. Well, one thing's for sure, it's not going to look the same as it looks right now. Like we know that, and people are having to make decisions going back to COVID and variants and things like that. So I get in taking care of yourself and taking care of your health, and whether that 20% of the population that's got a gym membership, right? And there's a smaller percentage of that actually uses that gym membership. I think that 80% left over, going back to what we were talking about, being about a shitty operator and a lower barrier, you might even be a low barrier of entry to start a new studio or a new program and get some people and actually make a living doing that until something like this happens, right? Where now you're going to be exposed, and you've been exposed, and whether you've closed under the guise of, well, it was COVID and so I closed, or it was just, this is a good opportunity for me to get out. Yeah. I'm doing it. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go quietly or whatever else. But I'm taking the free assistance. Yeah. I mean, I'm taking the free money you're giving me, regardless, and I'm not going to worry about the debt. It's the same as going back to the home loans and whatever else. Like, what's the impact of this longer term? Well, we saw what the impact of that was longer term, and we still haven't learned from those lessons.
Do it again.
Look, this is what people are doing now. I mean, we're refinancing our house. We're taking equity out of our home to play in the market, whether that's in stocks or whether that's in crypto and these other currencies or whatever else. People are making these kinds of decisions now. So I'm going to take this over to the health side of things. So when do people wake up to the reality of the heartburn, right? The skin thing that you mentioned, the gut thing that you mentioned or may have mentioned in there. When do they wake up to, this is a symptom of a bigger problem, and if I took better care of myself on a daily basis, I wouldn't maybe have this heartburn, I wouldn't have this skin thing, I wouldn't have this gut problem, and God damn it, I probably wouldn't be as at risk of contracting the virus potentially. We don't know that.
No.
But what we do know statistically now is if you do, and you're probably gonna, and with each new letter in the alphabet, you're probably going to get it then. If you haven't already, you're going to get that, right? And if you already had it, we already know you can get it again.
Yeah.
At what point when do people recognize that, man, I could probably live in a little less fear of all of this stuff if I just took better care of myself. So maybe I should join a gym. Maybe I should start an exercise program. How long does it take, dude?
I mean, seriously, again, like we talked about earlier, sphere of control, sphere of influence, and knowing what you can't control or influence. So as an operator in the fitness space, like I think there's a responsibility to go, okay, what can we do differently, right? And I think at its core, like that's what we were doing as a company was how can we approach fitness differently? So it's not treadmills and weights.
Right.
Because a lot of people have tried that and it's just, man, that's not for me. But then there's just like, okay, well, there's nothing else, right? So one is like meet the consumer where they're at, right? Just how do we provide more things that can be enticing? Like, look, if the shit's not fun, people aren't going to do it. Like,
right, you got to have a gateway.
Yes, right? So how do I get people hooked on? And one, that has to be the messaging, right? Like you said, like, look, if you like spin's your thing, spin. Fuck, great.
Do something.
Do that. If you like running, like, go run, right? Nothing's stopping you. Especially here in Southern California, like, go outside and run. If you like lifting weights, lift weights. If you like punching things, come punch things. If you like, and I think that's, with our brand, I think that's kind of a cool thing, right? Is that like, hey, let's say that you are at your traditional big box. Well, we've got that. Come in, get on the elliptical, get on the treadmill.
Whatever.
You're going to get exposed to all this other, and again, even the way we design the layouts of our gyms, right? Like our cardio section faces, if you're on a treadmill, you're watching a jiu-jitsu class, you're watching
you got a front row seat,
captive audience. And you're going to see somebody that looks like you, that's your age, your build, you're overweight, and you're going to see them doing a class. And you're going to, at some point, you're going to go, this treadmill is boring as shit. I'm going to go do that. And so, first off, we've got to do that. The bigger thing, so one, I think all the gyms in the industry have a responsibility to figure out how do we get more people to. The bigger issue is, this is going to seem non sequitur, like it's way out of left field. It's not. Like our school system's fucked. Okay. Not that, and again, I'm not going to do the whole like, why do I have to take trigonometry? Like I'm never going to use that again. You're forcing your brain to learn new things. Solution finding, right? There is value to that, right? Like I would get in arguments with people about like, why do I have to take all these stupid gen ed classes when I was at Penn State? Like, I'm never going to use this. And I'm like, look, if you don't want to take all these gen ed classes, go to a trade school. Like, just look, you're learning how to learn. Mm-hmm. That's important. You need to learn how to learn. And you also sometimes need to learn how to trudge through shit that doesn't interest you. Mm-hmm. No, life. Not everything's going to be fucking fun. Put your nose down, like go do the work. But like, shouldn't schools be teaching more like personal finance stuff, right? Like learn how to balance a fucking checkbook, right? Kids, a checkbook was this thing that you have to learn that. But also, what have we done over the last 20, 30 years with physical fitness in schools?
Cut it out.
We treat it as if it's this thing. Oh, well, that's really not necessary. We'll just cut that.
Well, I can tell you.
We cut it and we cut it and we cut it. And now, even where you have like PE, parents just like, well, I'll just go get a doctor's note so my kid doesn't have to fucking take PE. Well, then we're instilling that, and only 20% of the kids are figuring it out and eventually
become a member of a gym.
The other 80%, it's instilled in them when they're in fucking elementary school. And here's where it goes. As soon as it switches from recess to PE, that's the problem. When does it stop being fun? When does it stop being recess? And when did it become another fucking class that you have to go to?
Why are we just continuing the play?
Just have recess.
Organized play.
Have recess all the way through fucking high school.
Yeah, I get it. And you got kids, and I
get worked up real quick.
Yeah, and me too, and they're athletic, right? Yeah. So they compete and and at various things or whatever. The point of that being is you've instilled that earlier as a parent, and so it's not coming from the parents to the kids, and because it's not coming from the parents, it's not, those parents are now the teachers, and those teachers that were those kids are now the administrators, and they're making these kinds of decisions.
The 80% of people that don't see value in
where's it coming
intrinsically,
from?
not even like there's intrinsic and extrinsic value, but the adults who don't see the value of play, who don't see the value of fitness as play, then don't pass that on to their kids, and it's just how do you break that cycle?
That's
and so
question.
now with this COVID thing, okay, you're 40 something years old, you're way overweight. You're in bad health, like you're freaked out by COVID because you know you're at risk, at a higher risk than if you were in better shape. My hope,
what's your outlet,
is that you're going to look at your kids and try to break the cycle and go, hey, I might not be in shape, but I want my kids to be active. And I want to model better behavior for my kids.
You got to do something.
I've got to start doing something.
It has to start
like,
there.
That's my pie in the sky hope.
I think it's very idealistic, but I think it can be a reality if there's a larger charge or sense of personal responsibility to getting these things done.
Now, what would be great is if in all of these fucking news segments and all of the governmental press conferences, if there was more, like we're almost 2 years into it. I've yet to hear, get your ass to a gym.
Yeah, we're on the opposite side of that. I can tell you what the governor of this state did and actually cut out the presidential fitness testing that we used to have, that we all grew up with, right? Which actually
push-ups and sit-ups and
it
is the sit and reach still in it?
I hope they cut the sit and reach out. I don't think it's still their worst thing ever. But the mile was the big one, and that was the thing. And we don't want to do this because it embarrasses kids and it hurts their self-esteem. That was literally the line that came out of the governor's office. I was shocked.
When that comes out of their mouth, do they immediately stop and go like, God, that sounded terrible?
I think it's important. Like, it's okay to be embarrassed. That's a feeling, and that's okay.
Dealing with embarrassment is a skill set.
So why do you feel embarrassed? And is that internal or is it external? And if you're blaming the exercise test or evaluation as the reason you're embarrassed, and now that's a big problem for you, then again, what you've now done is you've cast responsibility or projected it onto something else. I can tell you my story and how the brief story is how I got heavily involved in fitness, and why I became inspired was because of that test. And they lined all the boys up on one side one day and all the girls up on the other side, and there were 2 pull-up bars out in the PE yard, which we had every day. We'd PE, and we did things like we played dodgeball. It was like a golf session, the period. We'd do 6 weeks or 4 weeks of that. We'd maybe play tennis, or we'd get in the swimming pool. Everybody had to swim every year, which was a thing, right? That was a big deal. Kids getting in the pool, and that was PE. PE is a very different thing now if you even have it in your school, but we did this presidential physical fitness testing, and one of the things we did was pull-ups. So they lined you either had to pull up or you had to do the bar hang, right? Mm-hmm. And so they lined all the kids up, and there must have been 30 kids in each line, boys, girls each side, and they're getting up there, and I don't know what I expected to have happen when I got there, but I'd watch 10 or 15 kids go in front of me, and when I got up on that bar and I grabbed onto that bar, I literally could not move. I was like hanging on for dear life, and the girl next to me did like 4 pull-ups, and I was devastated. Like, I was like mortified. Like, wow, I'm hanging from this bar. This girl over here, and again, there's a lot of reasons why maybe she could do pull-ups and I couldn't do pull-ups. One is which I'd never tried one before. Nobody had ever asked me to really do a pull-up before, like really do a pull-up, right? And maybe maybe this is a gymnast that I didn't know. She's a gymnast and she's just knocking out pull-ups. I have no idea. All I know is it registered with me. This isn't okay that I can't pull my body weight up to that bar. Now, I'm not saying that everybody in the world needs to be able to do a pull-up, but a pull-up is an important thing to do in a lot of places in life. I do believe in being prepared for situations that you do not expect, and the skill and the strength that it takes in order to do a pull-up, I think, is very practical in some situations. going to have that conversation at a different time. But I can tell you what it did motivate me to do. It motivated me to do some fucking pull-ups. And so that was like my 8th grade year. And in 8th grade, I was kind of a slow boomer and whatnot in terms of my maturity. But at that same time, my parents, or our house that we grew up in, was across the street from land owned by PG&E. And so there were these power lines running through this huge stretch of park, and so, or what was vacant lot, and they turned it into a park. And back in the day, they used to put the park horses in these parks.
Yeah.
Remember they had the little step up, you had the little push-up bars and things like that. Well, damn if they didn't put the pull-up bars literally across the street from our house. Said the 3 different levels or whatever. Well, I can tell you by the time I got to be my freshman year, nobody could do more pull-ups than I could. I was doing to the back of my neck. I was doing pronated, supinated grip. I just went out there every day and I tried. I made it, and whether, going back, this was a good thing or not in terms of doing pull-ups every day. I didn't miss a day. I'd go out there and every day I would try. I would try to do a pull-up. Yeah. And by the time, after close to a year, and, again, were there breaks in that? Certainly there were. We went on vacations. There was times I wasn't there. It was raining or whatever. I didn't go out there. But I made an effort to go out there and do it, and I did it. And it inspired me because I recognized that when I put effort to this, like, there is a reward at the end, and it made me feel good inside. I never felt mortified about it again. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
The new drive was, I'm encouraged to try something to get better at it. And it took feeling maybe a little bit embarrassed and a little bit mortified to recognize and become aware of that. And had I not had to sit with that and deal with that, right, to then be, again, find the drive to go out and do these pull-ups on a regular basis, I would have never known. I would have never known. So instead, we're protecting people. We're not sending a message that, look, if you feel afraid, that's okay.
Lean into that.
Feel afraid. Why are you afraid? Because you feel fragile, because you feel, you don't know what to do. You don't know what decision to make. You know what? That's okay to feel that way too. You have a decision to make, right? So hopefully you're not fatigued from making decisions, because the decisions you can make are, you can sit with the false security and the illusion that, taking a shot, taking a pill is going to fix things for you and everything's going to go back to normal at the end. But by now the reality is that is not going to be the case. It just isn't. And by the way, it doesn't help you get any closer to avoiding all those other symptoms that you had already described.
And it's strange. Like, so just, you pull on that thread, right? And again, it's weird that, we're talking about the fitness industry, but really, like, in my mind, the more that we talk about this, right? Like, you get back to this school system and what's instilled in our kids. And clearly our school system is broken and that we don't test well. Like, we don't, but it's so designed for these standardized tests, right? Math, science, English, right? The SATs, the ACTs, that you're not teaching people how to learn. You're teaching them how to pass these tests, right? And what's weird is, like, to your point, like, okay, why do we soften up PE, or why do we eliminate PE? Because when we go to run a mile, some kid's going to be embarrassed. Well, like, okay, well, what about the kid that's failing math?
Right.
That maybe could be killing it in PE or in arts, right? Like, it's so easy to strip away, like, when money's tight or an economy's tight or your business model of your school system is broken, so it's not profitable and it's not generating money. You cut arts, you cut music, and you cut PE.
That doesn't make any sense.
And so again, it's just, why are we so out of, like, how do you address the obesity epidemic? How do you address our country and our globe being overweight, sedentary, out of shape? Well, stop cutting PE.
Start with the kids.
Yeah. But we're too far gone.
It's been gone long enough to where it's not going to be realized by the current parents of elementary school kids. They didn't have PE.
No.
They didn't have PE. I mean, my kid's 19, and I remember, PE being a couple of days a week. So you just graduate.
You're right. There's a generation of parents starting right now that they didn't have
PE.
Fuck.
Yeah, they didn't have PE. That's the reality of it. And not only that. So here's what else has happened. Like, you didn't have PE, and sports was getting cut, or the funding for that was becoming less and less and less, right? So, and then as that was happening, it all became much more specialized. I mean, when I was a kid, there was baseball, basketball, soccer.
You were just trying lots of different stuff.
You always played. You were always doing other, things, and there were things available to you. And they had rec leagues, right? They had competitive leagues, and they had what we called select leagues, which is now like premier. If you looked at like soccer or whatever, like you chose those based on the reality of kind of where you were coming into it. Again, meeting the client where they are. Well, meet your kid where they are. If this is an experimentation phase for them, then put them in a rec league. Let them run around. It may not be as organized, but they're playing, right? And they're getting a feel for what they love or what they don't love. And you can see how they interact. And you get to learn as a parent how to support your kid in those particular things, right? And then you learn and hopefully you're learning this as a parent, and you're not trying to push them into a select or a premier or a very high level, type of thing as a parent because you want them to be there. It's because they want them to. But you have these different stages, and it's the same as if you're entering into fitness, right? And in a health and fitness program, there are things that you can do, like going, if you're sitting on the side of obese, right, and you have these underlying conditions. Going out and deciding you're going to start running today is a poor decision.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Going out and deciding you're going to walk and start to increase your steps on a daily basis is the right place to start. Enter rec leagues. Get into the rec league of running before you decide to start running, and it starts with walking.
Well, and now here's where the fitness industry is their own worst enemy. Because everybody's got to have a hot take, right? So to your point, right? Like, okay, you're obese. Running a marathon's probably not in the cards this year. Running isn't probably in the cards right now. So like you say, just, hey, go start walking, right? So you take something like Fitbit, 10,000 steps a day. Like, great. That's going to be good for some people. Then you've got people in the industry. Well, where does 10,000 steps come from? And that's really not enough. And like, shut the fuck up.
Right. It's a confusing message.
The person who's on the couch, if they got a Fitbit, and that extrinsically motivated them to hit 10,000 steps a day,
great.
Then fucking great.
That's great, yeah.
And if they graduate to something else and something that becomes something, or if they just for the rest of their life make sure that they get 10,000 steps a day, that's a win.
Right.
Let's stop shitting on baby steps.
Right. And overcomplicating it and saying my way's better. I agree with you 100%. That's in the age of social media and trying to get a leg up on everything. I think that's
how you get more likes.
That's how you get more likes. That's how you sell.
Hot take.
Yeah. And it goes, and then this shifts over to the back to the kids and the sports, and that things have become more specialized. Now it's you pick a sport and that's your sport, which to me is tragic for these kids that they don't have the ability to go out and experience all the other things. We also know how unhealthy that can be mentally, emotionally, but more specifically physically in terms of development, and getting caught in, basically repetitive movement patterns. And also partaking in, again, you've got a parent that wants their kid to be competitive. The kid wants to be competitive, and they think they're doing the right thing by hiring this specialized coach to teach them how to do these things very specifically. And what they end up doing is they end up missing the developmental phases of this really critical developmental phase of learning all the skills, right? The fundamentals. And
I'm going to Google when we get done. I'm going to Google who's the youngest person to have voluntary Tommy John surgery.
Right. Yeah. And so,
which really is involuntary, by the way, because the parent decided for the kid they were going to have Tommy John surgery. But
at the end of the day, so again, it sounds like it's two different things, but it really isn't. Mm-hmm. It's our narrow-minded outlook, as I think, from a fitness culture, that it has to be this way, and we have to go. It has to be applied this way, because if you're not applying it this way, it's wrong. Certainly, we know the benefits of resistance training. That those that are the most healthy, that live the longest, the number one factor to in terms of predicting longer term longevity is strength. Huh. We just know that, so that should be a major part of your program. It doesn't mean doing cardio is bad. It just means if that's what you're selecting as your major source of exercise, or that's what you're using to be healthy. Listen, you might consider adding some resistance training in, and vice versa, for that matter, because we know one of the other big predictors.
Anything to the extremes, right? Like, look, if all look, are competitive bodybuilders healthy? No, they're not. Are marathon runners healthy? I'm going to argue no, they're not.
Right.
Right.
It depends on your definition of health, which I think has been it's been perverted.
Yeah.
You know, and the bodybuilder's a great example. Like just because they look a certain way, right, and they eat these types of foods, you know, which we could talk about them being clean, but we know the realities of that. That's for a certain period of time for most of these people. But the point of that is this image that you're seeing doesn't necessarily represent health.
Yeah.
This time that it took you to run that marathon doesn't necessarily represent total health. And
we're movement beings. Like just
we need to move more. We need to move more. And
now again, now you get into, and again, this is where like when I do these coach certifications, I've got these slides in there that show like from 1990 to now, like over like the last 30 years, like, you know, how much fatter we've gotten as okay, well, what is that, right? Well, okay, look, we were an agrarian culture. Then you had an industrial revolution. We got fatter. And then we had this revolution, this, you know, web revolution, that, you know, this technology revolution that made everybody more sedentary, you know, in their day-to-day. So like we've slowly moved away from having to move. So now it has to be a conscious, right? Like you have to carve time out of your day to make sure that you go move.
Right.
But again, what we're telling the youth at a very young age through cutting out PE and then sticking them in desks for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, in front of a screen.
Well, then what do you think's going to happen?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I think we've got to. We definitely have some ground we need to make up here. I don't know that that's that there's a one answer, but it would be nice, to your point, to start hearing some messaging.
Yeah. Fine, don't take care of yourselves, but take care of the kids. Like, and for where we're at right now, as we navigate through COVID, like, can we start having some press conferences about? Look, here you go, and here this will be controversial, right? Hey, as long as we're subsidizing things and we're cutting checks for things and our government's going to why don't we subsidize gym memberships?
Right. Like why this speaks to the why are we continually making adjustments for the needs of the few versus the many, and at what point do those that do a good job of not burdening the system? And I'm just going to put it there. We all get sick. There's getting sick, and there's burdening the system. There's being afflicted with something horrible, right? Getting something like cancer, which is horrible. That is, you know, could be argued that it could be largely preventable based on lifestyle, diet, exercise, those kind of things. But at the same time, there are some things out there like we need to take care of people that are afflicted with these things. Don't get me wrong. I have family members and people that are very close to me in life that have, you know, it's not their fault. Right. And I'm not saying it's your fault that you're unhealthy, but I would ask you, you know, what decisions could you have made differently that may have helped you be in a better place to combat what you're dealing with right now? And the larger point is, at what point for those people that aren't doing that, for at least as long as they're not burdening the system, and they're not drawing from it, and have been contributing for as long as they've been contributing to supporting all of the other things that need to happen in order to support those people, at what point do we get a little bit of a break? That's what I would like to know. And so as long as we're writing all this legislation, when does that get slid into stimulus plans and bills like that?
Well, there you go. And again, from an industry ownership standpoint, this is where, and again, like IHRSA, you know, changed their leadership, right? And I think part of the gripe of people that have been paying into IHRSA, and part of that for the longest time was when all this legislation, when all this COVID stuff was happening, go back 18 months ago, and everybody was getting their cut of the pie, and the government was cutting checks to all these different industries, and the fitness industry just missed. Yeah. Well, now I think not the chairperson, I think the new CEO of IHRSA, I was looking at her background when I was out in Texas, and she was at an event that I was at. The reason IHRSA went with her, she's been a lobbyist in DC for the last 15 years. So like IHRSA woke up and went, we've got to start having a voice in DC.
Yeah, I think like a lot of businesses, but again, if it doesn't serve the larger interest, right?
Yeah.
From a monetary perspective, then it's probably not going to be important. And
well, but it's easy, like to me, like to your point, in the burdening of the system and what obesity does and the drain and the strain that it puts, like somebody from an economic standpoint has got to be able to model something out to go like, look, this investment would actually save us money.
Not a popular message though, man. Not a popular message. You just step on toes, and then again, there's a lot of interest there that just aren't going to have that.
Well, you're fighting big pharma,
right?
So.
And among other things, just in terms of improving yourself, though, and as a person, right? There's this mental component. I think there's a spiritual component. I think, interestingly, I've become a little bit more in touch with that in my later years, particularly in this last couple of years. There's obviously a physical component to this, and all the things that go into that sort of holistically. One of the things that I think is really important for people is that they're stimulated, they're finding other avenues, things to get good at, things to focus their time or pull their attention away from whatever they're seeing in the news or whatever they're having to deal with at work, or the cultural issues that are at play at work, in the family, outside on the street, whatever the case is. And you're a guy that has always been pushing for self-improvement, right? In one form or another in your life. And we've had a lot of conversations about these things in the past, but I know, and I'd love to have you catch me up on, and kind of wrap up with this, the things that you've been doing as a professional, right, to improve your ability to be a better professional and serve the people within your community better. And I mean, in your professional community, in your personal community, in your local community, what are the things you're doing to serve? And I think we all get into this business at some level because we want to help people and we want to serve. And I still feel like I'm doing that at some level, and I continue to do that. It's just who we are as a community. That's why we're still in it, because if we weren't in it, we'd have been gone out of here a long time it's ago. A labor of love, right? Yeah. So what are some of the things you're doing in your life, as a professional, as a person to improve, man?
Yeah. So I think, in the role that I'm sitting in now, right, it's these things change, right? And what I'm tasked to do could change at any moment. But like right now, so much of it is leadership and perspective, right? I feel like at this point, like I'm out of right now, I'm not in this day-to-day driving,
the business.
XYZ. Yeah. It's more of this leadership perspective, and far be it from me to be giving somebody else feedback on that if I don't feel like I'm doing that for myself. So, I mean, that really has been the last, I would say, the intentional, mindful, I'm going to work on these things. It is that it's being able to detach, being more self-aware. Not that this is new. I think the first time that I sort of had the recognition and the self-awareness, I have a temper. I'm hot-headed. Probably, yeah, 15, really? 16, right? Where the first time that I realized I wanted to pop off on somebody. So it's certainly been a 30-year project of okay, how do I use that? And so, yeah, I mean, the last couple of years, obviously,
it exposes things.
Yeah, for sure. And, at some point, and you and I have had this conversation about sort of the weird relationship that our country has with military, right? So growing up in the military and then not going that route after my grandfather did it and my dad did it, not going that route. But then seeing as a country, there's been this weird fetishization of all things military, right? So with that in mind, but there's still a ton of value in there, right? So I mean, I've probably gone pretty far into the echelon front, Jocko Willink, extreme ownership, dichotomy of leadership, wormhole.
All great stuff.
Oh yeah, as long as you're being self-aware to not
You're not a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't read a bunch of books and now I'm going to go to war. But man, there's a ton of value in that stuff, right? And again, it's what you see is the military has all the same issues that your industry has. It has all the same issues that my industry has. There are people that get promoted very high up that are complete dipshits and have no idea what they're doing, and that resonates with me because my dad being very much like my dad. I remember my dad coming home and this motherfucker, you know, like how, you know,
I went through the same thing.
And so I appreciate it. But it's like, that's been a big thing for me. Like the last couple, I'll tell you what, here's what COVID's done for me. And I think I was telling you about this. Like I've always enjoyed reading, right? But it's time consuming. Like you've got to carve out time. I'm going to sit down and read. And again, in an ever busy world, finding time to just read is hard. And when podcasts and audiobooks started picking up, like, oh, that's really cool. So I'd be like, okay, I'm going to listen to a podcast when I'm driving.
You can multitask, yeah.
I don't like listening to podcasts when I'm driving. I like having the windows down and the music up, and that's what driving time is for me. Yeah. And if I did put on a podcast when I was driving, I'd get 30 minutes into it and realize I hadn't listened to shit.
Right.
Or I'm going to, so I was trying to find times to do it. And working out, I work out at gyms that have very loud music and lots of distractions. And like, you can't listen to a podcast when you're in one of my gyms. Like that shit's just not happening. So when COVID hit and I'm working out in my garage and I'm working out in my driveway, man, I started plowing through audiobooks, started plowing through podcasts. So like really like the last 2 years has been like this intensive, like I've probably knocked out more books via audio, like via Audible, and more podcasts in the last 2 years than ever before. And now I find myself like, that's part. Sometimes like, even if like, so again, in the whole like intrinsic, extrinsic motivation to like work out, even sometimes like when I'm not motivated to work out, what'll get me to go work out is like, oh, you know what? I've got a podcast that I want to listen to, and I'm going to put that on. And while I'm listening to it, I'm going to work out. But yeah, I mean, for me, like the self-development thing has just been like to get better as a leader. Like, there's some stuff that you can do just through reps, right? Reps, you're going to get better the more interactions that you have. But like, if you step back, like, okay, if I'm going to put out a better version of me, I've got to input better stuff. And so it's just actively seeking out like, okay, what's going to be a good book to read or listen to, and what's a good podcast to get turned on to. And again, just for people at large, I mean, like the availability
of information,
is just, we spend so much time, Googling images of cats and, and not using the internet for all the things that it could be.
Yeah. I wonder what the big takeaway is, with all of that. I mean, obviously, because there is that all that content out there. Like, what do you really take away, in the end? What has been the big takeaway to this point, and how have you seen it impact not just yourself professionally, but also personally, and even as a dad, as a husband, and as just a dude?
The taking ownership piece, right? And again, I think, in hindsight, that's always something that I think I've been good at, right? I was never a finger pointer and blame. Like I've always been able to, okay, like, good, this happened. What do I do next? I think a powerful thing just for anybody to do is, there's this piece like in one of the, extreme ownership books, like even if something isn't your fault, even if it's not, like factually, it's not your fault. Step back from it and go, how could I make this my fault? How could I make this my fault? And then how would I impact it differently? Right. And I think that's like with any, like applying that to lots of different things, right? Like whether it's parenting, whether it's some shit going on in my daughter's life, whether it's some stuff going on at school, whether it's stuff going on with my wife, whether it's stuff going on with work, even stuff that like objectively, I just go, okay, well, somebody else clearly fucked that up. And I could just step back and go, that's not my fault. But like, if you can pause and just go, even if I got to do some mental gymnastics, how could I make this my fault and then improve it? Well, that's just going to have cascading effects, right? Because then other people are going to appreciate. I think other people are going to see that. They're going to appreciate that. So when future things happen, people are going to round up for you. Or people like there's a lot of positives to that. So I think that's probably over the last 2 or 3 years, that's probably like a big thing for me, is that not just taking ownership of things that you should, but like taking it a step further and like, how do I make things that aren't my fault? Like, how could I make that my fault, and how could I make it better?
What's next? What's the big project right now?
Global domination.
Yeah, global domination.
Yeah, what's next is
global
what's next is getting Taya into college and getting Joaquin into whatever he wants to do next, right? He just wrapped up T-ball and did soccer and T-ball. I think we got basketball up next, and he's swimming, and
it's life, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that's what's fun. I guess, what's next is snowboarding, which is always a constant. Snowboarding, raising some kids, and opening up some gyms.
Good, man. That sounds like a great plan.
It is. It'll be fun. You can't really project. There's more variance.
I got you. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Donnie, good to connect with you, brother.
Always, man.
Missed you.
Yeah. I'll be up in San Jose in like 2 weeks, I think.
Come visit me.
I will.
Yeah. We'll grab some whiskey and some cigars or something. We'll sit down and have a chat.
Overdue. Long overdue.
Love you, brother. Thanks for coming down.
Absolutely, man. Love you too.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Iron Sights. If you enjoyed our conversation, you can support our mission by hitting the subscribe button, leaving a review, and sharing the podcast with a friend. I'll see you on the next episode.